Well, have you?
No, I don't think so.
Not yet.
I haven't got any chat-up lines, I'm afraid, and I never thought of that.
I mean, the thing is that I've got the world's longest marriage, and I've always been incredibly happy with my situation with my wife. And I married when I was 22 and she was 18 years old, and so there wasn't an awful lot of time before that. But I do remember when we first started out, Colin used to love us when we were semi-pro. He was constantly trying to chat up people, and he'd use any excuse, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he used any lyrics, because I remember in the very first gig we ever did, he tried to prevail on us to do 2 or 3 instrumentals, because if we were doing instrumentals he could leap off the stage and start chatting up the birds in the
Very professional. Very professional.
Yeah.
Well, I remember we had a night off in Blackpool, and we were walking up the front in Blackpool. It's absolutely packed with holidaymakers. And we just had a big hit record, and we crept up behind these 2 girls and started singing "If I Fell"
in perfect harmony,
the Beatles song, and we thought they would just fall at our feet, and they just turned around with a look of horror and just ran off at 100 miles an hour.
It's funny how you remember that, because I remember them being absolutely transfixed.
From the Zombies, I think I'd always say She's Not There, because it's the first record.
Sentimental reason.
Yeah, it's the first record we recorded, and it changed our lives forever. From other records that I've recorded away from the Zombies, I think possibly Old and Wise by the Alan Parsons Project, which I sang on the album, is a big favourite of mine. And I know that when we play it within this incarnation of the Zombies, I can see from the reaction of the audience that it's an important song for a lot of people. And I didn't write it. Eric Woolson wrote it, actually. He's a wonderful writer. I'm a big fan of his writing, and it was a real thrill to record that song.
I tend to like the things we've just recorded. I honestly do. They tend to be my favourites. But one thing I want to say about She's Not There, because I would agree with Colin for sentimental reasons, I can never get away with that. I mean, that was the thing that first meant that 18 years old we were sort of living a dream, which was extraordinary. But we were talking about this in the taxi coming up. When we recorded She's Not There, it was in mono. I mean, that's how long ago it was. And we had 4 tracks in those days to record on. Now, we wanted to add something. So on the mix, or the reduction as they used to call it in that days, what happened is the 4 tracks get mixed down to 1, actually, as it was in those days, mono. So the 4 tracks that you got with the vocals, the drums, the bass, and the harmonies, all went down to 1 track. When that happened, we wanted to add a drum part. So that drum part was added as the 4 tracks were mixed down to 1. And as they were transferred to the tape machine that just had 1 track on it, the mono track, that's when the extra drum part was added. Now, I think the original mono version of She's Not There, that was the original big hit around the world, sounds fabulous. I really think it sounds terrific. Ever since then, because everybody wants everything in stereo, the mono has almost got lost. People do their own stereo mixes, whether it's for whatever reason, a film or one thing or another, and it means that that drum part, which is very important, that we added, is never on there. And the mix is not the mix that was there originally. And that's really galling to me, because I know how good the original sounds. And all the stereo mixes don't come up to that, in my opinion. So that's just a little personal beef. But at the same time, I still love the fact that all over the world, particularly in America, well, everywhere, radio stations are still playing it. So I'm very grateful for that. But that's a slight beef.
Well, there is a bit of truth in that. It was the last song that was recorded for the album, and it was only finished in the morning before we went into the studio. So the fact of it was, I didn't know the song very well when we went into the studio, and I was struggling to sing it, and the time was ticking on. We were on we had a very small budget, and we had one eye on the clock, and Rob was saying, in a very professional way,
yeah, absolutely.
That melody's not quite right.
I don't think I was as strong as that one.
Anyway, the language got a bit heated. I wouldn't tell you the kind of language. And of course, this is coming from the the studio bit there to the live thing, so it's coming through headphones and it's really loud and everyone can hear it. The language is getting really, really bad. And I just said to Rod, listen, if you know it so well, you come and sing it. And Rod said to me, you're the bloody singer. You stand there till you get it right. So when you listen to It's the Time of the Season for Loving, I just want you to know that when we were recording it, we were practically fighting one another. And in the end, I'm very glad that I did stay there till I got it right. I think it's a great song now. But because of that, it wasn't my favourite song on the album. Probably Carousel 44 was probably, I would have thought, to me, that was the hit single, but I was wrong. Time of the Season was the big hit single.
But I mean, I'm not going to make it. It was a long time ago. But one of the two of us said, why don't we just drop that section out and see how it sounds? And I mean, things were done very quickly in those days. So we did that. Loved the way it sounded. And then the other thing I have to say is just before the organ solo, in the middle, there's a snare crack. Just goes, and it and you know, not being a professional engineer, I said to Peter Vitters, who was mixing it, let me just turn up the treble on that, and I just sort of put it full up, you know, but it works, and that's a slight technical thing.
The trouble is, it's such a long time ago. It's 50 years ago. Now, if you'd asked me what I had for lunch yesterday, I'd still be struggling. But 50 years ago, you got any thoughts? I mean, I know we were incredibly influenced by the Beatles, but of course they're hardly obscure.
But that wasn't Sgt. Pepper, because we were when we started recording Odyssey and Oracle, Sgt. Pepper hadn't come out. They'd just walked out of the studio as we walked in.
That's true.
We might have heard, by the end of recording of Odyssey and Oracle, we would have heard some of the tracks. I know that this is hardly an obscure group. I know that, like the Beatles at the time, we'd heard Pet Sounds 2 or 3 months before, or something like that. And there's two things I say about that certainly influenced me in my writing. One thing was that naturally in my writing, like with She's Not There, I always used to write harmonically, where chords would have different bass notes. They wouldn't just have root notes on the chord. And also, I did like melodic bass lines, and a lot of those lines were written with the song. Like, you know, do 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 was actually written as part of the song. It wasn't just something that was improvised when we recorded. I loved the way that Brian Wilson on Pet Sounds seemed to take that he always had in his armoury anyway, and really develop it. And I know McCartney loved that as well, because when McCartney did Sgt. Pepper, he really developed his natural melodic bass line playing. But I remember really, it made me concentrate on that and get excited about that area of things harmonically with the bass. So I would say that the Beach Boys, in that way, and the lovely harmonic construction of their songs, was an influence. But you've always loved that too, haven't you?
Oh no, absolutely. But I was just thinking back to the beginning, when actually the Zombies originally were called the Zombies R&B, because we were so much into rhythm and blues of those days. Yeah. So Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley,
Ray Charles,
Jerry Lee Lewis.
Everybody. We used to do Muddy Waters,
but also we were exploring a lot of the blues as well. We really only scratched the surface on that, and I think, but it was a huge influence on us when we were starting. But everything changed for us when we recorded She's Not There. Rod had started to be a songwriter, and Chris White had discovered he could write songs as well. And from there on in, basically, we were really recording songs that they'd written, rather than trying to find songs by the greats of the blues and rhythm and blues. But in the early days, we were very interested in rhythm and blues and the blues.